Welcome to Entanglement Radio, transcendent talk for the conscious mind. Join us for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science, new thought, and conscious healing. Explore the potential and infinite possibilities of what it means to be human with some of the best guests in radio. At Entanglement Radio, it is all connected. Now, here is your host, Angela Levesque, on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Yes. Oh, here we go. I think that we are actually live now. We've been having some serious difficulties here. I think that if you are just joining us, we are listening to you're listening to Entanglement Radio on iom.fm. I apologize. I've been having some pretty serious technical difficulties here with Skype, and sometimes those things happen. You just have to be able to roll with it. So if you are just tuning in now, or if we are just finally connected, which is awesome, my show today is with Paddy Fievet, and she's the author of The Making of a Mystic, Writing as a Form of Spiritual Emergence. And I am quite excited to talk about this because this has been something that I have been doing for quite some time, since I was a kid, and I don't even think I fully appreciated what I was doing when I was doing this when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and it is something that I have continued and developed over the years. So coming up next week, we have a rebroadcast, my very first show that actually was never broadcast on the air. We have Kimberly Truitt, and we're going to be talking about how to create soul intention, which is perfect for springtime as we shift into this uprising of energy. It's interesting. We always make New Year's resolutions in January in the dead of winter when the energy is more dormant. So now is the perfect time. So do tune in for that, because I am going to be in France for the next couple of weeks, but I will be back on April 8th. And I'll be talking with Reverend Dr. Karen Tate, and we're going to be talking about sacred feminine liberation theology. So she said we need to stop talking about the sacred feminine in terms of archetypes and actually look at it as a very well-formed ideology for moving forward and shifting the planet and evolving. So that should be an interesting conversation. If you need to get a hold of me at any time during the week, you can email me at angela@hestiahealth.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Hestia Health. So if you were tuning in at the beginning of the program, again, I apologize. Sometimes things just don't work out. So you just got to roll with it. So I do have Paddy Fievet on with us, and she is the author of Making of the Mystic. And so let me just tell you a little bit about her. As a modern mystic, facilitator, speaker, author, and artist, Paddy Fievet provides information to assist others in discovering their own sacred journey through books, blogs, courses, and speaking engagements. She helps people to gently discern the difference between our own authentic sacred story and those stories you tell yourself to endeavor to make things real in your life. She is a member of Spiritual Directors International and has studied spirituality, psychic arts, and metaphysical law in depth, earning a Ph.D. in metaphysics. She is also the author of When Life Cried Out, One Woman's Spiritual Quest to be Fully Alive. So, Paddy, I want to welcome you to the program. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Angie?
I'm good. Live is live, and that's just sometimes that happens. So let's, like I said in my little introduction there, this has been something, I called it automatic writing growing up. Or as I learned to discover a little bit more about what I was doing. So when we talk about the words being psychic or channeling or automatic writing, are those the same things that you were writing about in your book?
Do you know, when I first had the experience, I had never heard of automatic writing. I had never heard of channeling. I did not know what either one of them was. And when it came quite by surprise one day, and I was at a course learning how to use your intuition to answer questions in your life. And so you would think that I would have had a clue, but my intuition had been blocked at childhood for lack of validation. So I was at this course, and the last thing of the weekend, we were to write something on the top of the page that we had wanted to know all of our life. It was a problem you had had all of your life, and you were to go into an altered state like we had been taught and receive the message. And if the message came by vision, then try to draw a picture of it. If you heard words, then write it. And our teacher, Tina, explained a little bit. But I was there for the weekend only because the hostess had bribed me with a couple of free energetic allergy treatments in order that I come. So I was, as they say in the Deep South, a low ball in high weeds. It's a golfing term. And so when she said, go and do this in the corner of the room, I did not have a clue that anything was going to happen. So I had no expectations. And to answer your question, to me, channeling has an expectation with it that you will receive a message in a certain way from another form, probably otherworldly, not in this earth, of course, but an angel, a guide, a deceased person, something of that way. I was just opening myself up to what I knew as God, and this is my question. So I wrote at the top of my paper, why do I never feel good enough? That was what I was dealing with at that time. I was just about to get into a really nasty divorce. I had absolutely no sense of self that was righteous at all, and I was lost. And so that's what I wrote on the top of my page, and that was the question of the time. And I went into the altar state. I was sitting in the corner of the room with my legs folded like a Sufi mystic who knew what she was doing, and I didn't have a clue. But obviously something was going right, because in this altar state, as a witness, not a participant, my hand was moving at the top of the page, then it would move to the bottom of the page, then it would move to the middle of the page, then it moved, and it was writing. I was not aware of what was being written, but when then my hand stopped, and I came back into 100% consciousness. And I read it, and there was my answer. I've got this in the book. I call it Castles. So there was my answer, and when I read it, I just burst into tears. And then I didn't go back to the group. And the group came because it was so profound for me in my life. And then Structure came and said, Patty, it's okay if it didn't happen. And just through blubbering tears, I said, but it did. Something out there cares enough about me to answer my question. And Angela, that's how it got started. And because of the way it got started, to go back to your original question, that is why I make a difference in my own life between the channeling and the automatic writing. Sometimes they fuse together. But channeling, I'm aware of a presence or a group that is sending information. With the automatic writing, I'm only aware of me and God, spirit, just something wonderful. The automatic writing feels like I am, how do I explain it? Like I am coming home. It's like a heavenly experience, and I cannot do it without bursting into tears afterwards. Tears of joy. Tears of joy. The automatic, the channeling, to me, I'm aware of what's being said. With the automatic writing, I am not aware of what I'm writing. It's like I know I'm writing, but I don't know what is happening, and I have just gone somewhere else. And I know that was a long answer to your question, but but that is how I needed to explain it.
No, and that makes it. And as I was talking about when I was a kid and I used to write poetry, I would write, and all of a sudden I would shift. The next day I would look at what I wrote and I wouldn't remember writing any of it. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? Well, you can hear that we are up on a break. When we return here, I want to talk a little bit more about the process and how it kind of developed for you. And I'd like to share a few of my insights as well. So you guys are listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque, and we are discussing the making of a mystic with Paddy Fievet. We'll be right back.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Join Elliot Jolish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jolish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jolish Hour. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
All right, we are back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. My guest again today is Paddy Fievet, and we are talking about her book, The Making of a Mystic, Writing as a Form of Spiritual Emergence. So, Paddy, you're telling us about your very first experience with automatic writing. So then what happened after you left from that workshop? How did this process sort of evolve for you?
Angela, when I left the workshop, I felt like I had had a new experience. Well, I had had a new experience, but I felt like it was so profound, I really questioned whether it would even happen again. To me, it was a version of mystical experience. I got an answer. Something happened with my right hand and a piece of paper and a yellow legal tablet, and it was just profound. Could I do it again? That was a question. And what did I do? Well, I didn't do. That's what I want to get across to the radio listeners, something I allowed to happen. I got out of the way and allowed it to happen. Could I allow it to happen again? So I wrote another question at the top of the page of my yellow legal tablet. And it's so funny. I thought, well, I've got to use the same pen. I've got to use the same legal tablet. I was at that place. But and that's funny because you don't, of course, but that's where I was. And so I did that and went to my altered state. And yes, it happened again. And I did another question. Yes, it happened again. And this was like a psychology 101. It was the best spiritual psychology I've ever had. And it was helping me get over a lot of issues in my life that I thought were just pertinent to me, but it turns out they are not. And then I thought, can I do this on the computer? It would just save a lot of trouble because I was typing it and putting it back into the computer. And so I realized that I could only do it on the computer if I covered up the computer screen. So I type along, and I wouldn't know what I was typing. I could not read it. If I would read it while I was writing, it would bring me back into the consciousness, and my editor would try to dot the I's and cross the T's, my internal editor. And so I would cover the computer screen with a towel. And that's how it went for a long time, the question and the answer. But then it began to evolve. And it evolved quite profoundly for me. I became aware first of what I was typing. And as the witness, but I tell you what, and then I became aware of a vibration. That was it in the room? Was it something I was experiencing? I wasn't really sure at that time, but I became aware, and it still felt like a holy experience, so I let the flow happen, and I never did it without an intentional prayer to begin with and a prayer of thanksgiving afterwards. I wanted to make sure my experience was what I knew as holy. And so it happened like that, and I was just kicking along, and by that time the divorce had come through, and I was in the thralls of it. And I realized there wasn't such as big a difference as I kept doing it between me and what I was feeling. And this is important for the reader to know, the listener to know, because, and I explained this in the book, The Making of a Mystic, it wasn't that the change of how it was happening, it was that my own vibrational essence was going at a higher level. And that's, how do I explain that? We're all vibrational beings. If you, those of you out there will understand, if you hold a piece of fruit, say, that has GMO that maybe has pesticide on it, and then you hold a natural one in the other hand that is just made from seed like God was made and grown in organic soil, you will feel the difference in these two things. So we're all vibrational essences. But as I was learning and growing in wisdom and being helped through spirit, my own vibration changed. And so the way it came to me or through me would change. And there's a section in the book where I don't want to say talk to trees because trees don't talk, but they are a spirit. There's a spirit of life in every living thing. And when you surrender to each life form, you will get thought forms and feelings, and the way it interprets for me is through writing. I can feel it I'm a feeling person, but to understand it, I would have to translate it into words or put it into words. And so I started talking with the trees for a while, and the messages from the trees were so much different. They weren't as personal as my questions and answer sessions initially were. The trees were telling me about life in general and getting along with people, and how you have to bloom where you're planted, to use a common phrase, and grow in the direction that's going to give you the most life. And to me, these experiences were just as profound. But getting where you were as a child, I had to evolve into the poetry aspect of it. And from the trees, I went on a trip one time to a cabin in the mountain right by myself to try to get body and soul together. And I realized that the spiritual connection between the leaves falling and the stream meandering by and the mountainous hillsides, such a spiritual connection when I turned my small self loose and would focus with an open heart, what I call a poet's heart, focus with an open heart with what the butterflies or the birds or the trees or the flowers or the leaves or whatever had to offer me, then the spiritual connection, the vibrational essence was so high, Angela, that it came out in poetry. And I imagine that's what you were experiencing as a child.
Well, yes, I have a few things that I want to talk about. The shifting of the vibration. I did a workshop on reconnective healing, which is taught by Dr. Eric Pearl, and I'm going to just call it a type of energy modality, which I'm sure he's cringing if he could hear me say that. But anyway, it's about bringing in the new frequencies of light, information, and intelligence. And when I first started doing that class, my third eye was just activated all the time, like for days and days after I came back from that workshop. And so that's what I was thinking about when you're talking about, and then you shift up to that frequency. And so when my third eye stopped being so activated, it wasn't that I stopped having those experiences. It's just that my body had then adjusted to that new level of frequency. And it's interesting, and this is what I was thinking about as I was reading your conversations with nature, is that right after that I took that workshop, I'm walking and I just had this most amazing feeling. I'm looking at this bush and I'm thinking, I'm actually not thinking, I'm feeling like I am that bush. Not, there's that bush and we're all connected, but I am that bush. And I thought that is such a weird experience to feel, to have that level of connection, to know that there is ultimately no separation between that bush and that tree and those flowers, and that those essentially are you as well and you are them. And that, as I was reading your poetry and reading your descriptions of your experiences with nature, that's exactly the feeling I had as well. And it's interesting as your body does this work, how it does shift to new frequencies, and how then all of a sudden you become well adjusted to that new place. And I just love that.
That's exactly. You've described it very well. There's a unity, there's a oneness that shows up. And there is no difference between you and the bush or you and the tree. Your analytical mind says, but there's a difference. But we're not talking about the analytical mind at this point. We're talking about soul and spirit and that type of connection. And it's profound.
It is. So one thing, when in your conversations with nature, are they ever saying, help me or help us or stop, putting Roundup on us? And or do you feel that they have a general sense of peace and they're just okay with what's going on?
As a child, I had an experience with an oak tree. Like I said earlier, I was a very intuitive child, but it was put away in the back of my psyche. I closed down because of lack of validation. And there was an experience. When I was born, I was given an oak tree. It was planted the day I was born. So by the time I was 10, the oak tree was 10 years old, and it was tall, and it was growing, and it was doing beautifully. And it got chopped in half. And as a 10-year-old, I literally heard, with my third eye, I heard psychic hearing. I heard the oak tree screaming. Was it me screaming because I was watching the tree getting chopped in half? Was it the oak screaming? And as an adult and having had lots of psychology sessions, pro and con, it was the tree. Yes, I was too, but it was the tree. I had a conversation with the tree that we had to cut down. Here, part of it was not well, and we had to cut the tree down here, and it was going on the corner of the driveway, and that was becoming a problem. But I went out there before I could even think about cutting the tree down. I had to go out and have a conversation with the tree. Is this okay? Is this okay? And the spirit of the tree says, yes. It is okay. I am dying anyway. Yes, it is okay. My spirit will live. It goes elsewhere.
I just finished watching Avatar again, and I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but when they have to take a life of an animal to feed their tribe, they go and they say a prayer, and they have a conversation with it. And it reminded me of that. And I could just think, if we could just bring even just a little bit of that sense of reverence into our daily life and realize not only with the plants and the trees and that, but just with the people in our lives, seeing them as a spirit and a soul and a light, and being able to connect with them on that level, instead of, it would be so much harder to commit some of the atrocities that are going on, globally, geopolitically, when you'd see that. So I love that level of reverence for the spirit of the earth and the trees. And even if we could just do that a little bit more for the people in our lives, that would be so much better. We're going to be coming up here on a break pretty quick. When we get back, I want to talk a little bit about how your view of God has changed through some of this writing, and learn a little bit more about the how of things, the process of this type of writing. So we will do that and more when we return here on Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque on IOM.FM.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Radio Namaste leads you down the yellow brick road into portals of consciousness with the blue-collar goddess as your host. Interviews with humans who could be famous or just popular, and answers to everything are on the agenda. Tune into OMTimes Radio and drop in on Thursdays at 3 Eastern. It's a different brand of enlightenment.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Know what to do, just can't figure out how to fit it all into your busy life? It doesn't have to be that way. Hi, I'm Ellen Baisberg from Seamless Life. Join me every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio and learn the how of conscious living. Let me and my guests help make your life seamless.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
All right, we are back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. If you are just joining us, my guest again today is Paddy Fievet, and she is the author of The Making of a Mystic, Writing as a Form of Spiritual Emergence. So, Paddy, I want to ask you, as you started having these really profound mystical conversations with what you describe as God, how did that shift and change? Because I'm not sure if you grew up with organized religion. I certainly did, and I've got to say that my understanding of God and the way that we fit into this world and in our relationship with God has changed dramatically. And I was just wondering, has any of that changed for you?
It's changed a lot. I can remember when I think I was 6 years old, thereabout, in Sunday school class. And I can remember, I can still see in my mind's eye, I can still see the picture. The teacher, we were sitting around a table, and the teacher showed us a horrible, horrible picture. It was a copy of a painting, I guess, of people being tortured in hell. They were burning, those flames coming all around. And she looked at us and she says, I want you to know, if you're not good little boys and girls, this is what's going to happen to you.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it was beyond traumatic. I embrace my sensitivities now, but when I was young, I didn't know to embrace my sensitivities. That picture, well, if I still remember it, obviously it made a big impression on me. I've never been one to speak up unless I really had something to say. And I remember looking at her and shoving the picture away from me and telling her, if God is that mean, then I'm going to believe in Santa Claus, because at least he gives you a present when you're good. And she looked at me, and in her eyes, that was blasphemy. My grandmother's house was across the street from the church. And she told me to go to my grandmother's house, that I did not belong in Sunday school with that kind of attitude. And maybe she was right about that. But that was what I was taught. There was a complete separation between me and God, and that you had to be good or consequences would happen. That's the religion that I grew up in. And it wasn't what I know after the writing started. I had to get rid of that. I had to get rid of all of that and put my religious teachings in an imaginary box and stick it under my chair and pull something back out again when I thought that I could incorporate it at a better level. There is no separation. God is bigger than we are, greater than we are, but we are part. I think Rumi said it well. I am a drop of water in a sea of God, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very good way of saying it. Yes, it changed completely. I even had one of the questions in Making of a Mystic. One of my questions was, who or what is God? And I came up with a more profound answer than I had ever learned in church. The tree is an expression of God. You and I are each individual expressions of God. And I like that. It gives us a point within that we can lean on and be and become. It's our being. It's what we are. We're not humans having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And it's a huge difference, Angela.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that, and I that passage that you were talking about, asking what is God, that was pretty profound, reading that. And that has, been my understanding. And even the fact that you're, having this conversation with me right now, saying that, you write and God speaks to you. And I remember when Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh, when his book came out, and
Yes.
people were saying, oh no, but you can't talk to God. That's kind of, that only happened to a few people thousands of years ago that were, chosen ones. And I think that that's one of the things that we kind of have to get over too, is that we can have that level of relationship with the divine, and thinking that we are worthy enough to engage in that conversation. Wouldn't you agree?
I do agree 100%. And I don't think it's that we can't speak to God. We have this belief that God cannot speak to us.
Mm-hmm.
Individually, uniquely, one-on-one. One of my best stories is Mother Teresa. She was on a plane, and a reporter happened to be seated next to her or within talking distance of her, and he thought, oh, I'm going to get a good scoop for a story. And he said, Mother Teresa, what do you pray? What do you say when you pray? And she said, sometimes I don't say anything, I listen. And thinking he had a real scoop, he says, and what does God say? And she says, young man, he listens too. And I think that's an easy way that we can describe the one-on-one relationship, the bonding. We're both listening simultaneously at the same time. It's a bonding.
I love that. Do you always feel, and this is an interesting thing as I was reading your book, and maybe going back to that conversation about the difference between channeling and automatic writing, is that sometimes I feel when I do this, at least now this is how it evolved, that I can now, if I so choose, to have conversations with, my master guide, or I can write and have conversations with the angelic realm. Do you feel that has a place as well, and can be an important aspect of using writing as a spiritual tool?
I do. And just as you were talking, I had my own aha just here this moment. I realized sometimes there's something profound that needs to be said to me, and I don't have ears to hear it, but I'm willing, but I don't have ears to hear it, maybe at that high vibration. Maybe I've got a block. Maybe I have an issue or something. But if I don't have ears to hear it, then it may come through an angelic form, or it may come through a guide. I always state a prayer and ask that God speak to me in a way that I can hear it with the information that needs to be said to me. So sometimes I feel like there's an angel present. Sometimes I feel like there's guides, and my guides, they don't come one at a time. There's a group. And so I forget the question right now. That was such an aha moment. So, but yes, that does happen. The angels and the guides will come, and sometimes it's just a direct one-on-one. When it's a direct one-on-one, it comes more of an automatic writing type thing. When it's with the angels and the guides, I tend to call it channeling, just because I'm aware of a presence. It's how I can separate it.
Well, I know that, I reach different levels of connection, and sometimes when I'm doing my writing, I'll start out just like you. And when we get back from the break, I want to talk more about the process. But, I'll start out just like you with a question, and I'll be writing like I was writing in my journal. And then all of a sudden my consciousness kind of shifts out of the way, and, spirit takes over, and I will write. And you can tell when I'm writing when that happens, because my writing actually changes. It's different writing, and it's interesting because then it will switch. It will switch from me kind of writing about something, and then it'll switch to somebody writing something to me. And so again, it goes back to that thing about being able to allow this process. It's not something that you do, it's something that you really allow. And I think that that's an important point. And one of the things that you say in your book too is that you leave the how. When you ask for something, you should leave the how up to God. And
yes,
I think that that's really important. Explain a little bit about what you mean by that.
We have a limited capacity to understand how things will work. Sometimes there may be a better way. We cannot think of it. We cannot get it intuitively. We can't think of a better thing. Well, we can't figure it out. We can't understand what the pieces are, or what step to take, or what direction to go. And so I learned a long time ago to leave the how to God. This is my intention. This is what I want to feel. This is what I feel like I need. Give me a validation. I always ask for validation. That's just me. Give me a validation. Is this in my highest and best interest? Okay. Help me, God, figure this out. And the next thing I know, I will get contacted. Somebody will call. I'll see something written in a magazine that just seems to pop off the screen. I will do some automatic writing. I have even awoken at night and seen something I have written on a tablet I keep beside my bed, and yes, it's in my handwriting, and no, I don't remember it, and no, I don't know what it's about, and yes, I have to go look up the definition on the computer, But I have always learned that there's a better answer out there. There's a better how-to answer out there than I possibly can ever come up with. And so I open up to it, and I surrender to it, and I ask, and I allow it to come to me, however it can come, that I can see it.
So as you're saying that, I'm thinking the word, there's a certain amount of surrender that happens, because I think we like to micromanage our life and, have it. We got lists and we've got spreadsheets and we've got, we try and do that. And as you're saying that, I hear the word surrender.
Surrender is one of the hardest things I have ever had to come to grips with. If you are ever in a relationship of any kind, whether it's a relationship as your parents as a child, or whether it's a relationship, as a partner or a lover or a husband or wife, if you were ever in any kind of relationship where you have had to give in all the time and surrender to another person's wants in order to be safe, then it is my opinion that surrender becomes a hard thing to understand. But it is not that kind of surrender that I am talking about. When I talked about surrender to the divine, and I know this is what you're speaking of, I assume, when I'm talking about surrender to the divine, it is letting the divine hold us in the palm of his hand, just like a loving mother would cuddle a child. It's that kind of surrender. The child does not fight and hit and scream. The baby does not claw it. It cuddles up next to its mother or father. And that's the kind of surrender I'm talking about. It's that open-hearted surrender filled with grace and filled with love and filled with protection.
Well, we are up on our break. When we get back, I want... although there's not a specific set of rules or process, I think there's a couple considerations we need to talk about when we talk about automatic writing. So we will do that when we return here on Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque on OMTimes Radio. We'll be right back.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
The Conscious Parenting Radio Show provides inspiration and resources for loving, empowering, and respecting your children and yourself. Join me, Timothy, every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time as we consciously explore proven ways of living together in happiness, health, and harmony.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Simone Milicis would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio.
All right, we are back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque. My guest today is Paddy Fievet, and she's the author of The Making of a Mystic. For those of you who listen to this show, you know that this is my favorite segment of the show. I call it Bite-Sized Brilliance, where we talk about tools, techniques, tips to take what we've talked about through the last couple of segments and really be able to put it into our daily lives. So this segment is brought to you by Hestia Health, specializing in mind-body weight loss, awareness development, and energy healing. You can go to hestiahealth.com, where we create calm minds, open hearts, and inspired lives. So, Paddy, in your book, you have a chapter on the process of automatic writing, but it's not a strict set of rules that you have to do this. Like you said at the very beginning, you kind of thought you used to have to use the same sheets of foolscap with the same pen and this, and it doesn't require that. But are there some certain guidelines that people need to follow for automatic writing?
I do feel like there are guidelines, but like you said, it's not a definite how to, have your paper positioned in this certain way, always have a yellow legal tab, use a certain pen the whole time. It's nothing like that. It's not the business model at all. It's more of the surrender and connection type thing. And one of the first things I feel like that you need to realize as you start automatic writing or any type of artistic expression that you feel like spirit is speaking to you in two-dimensional form, realize that there is a greater spirit that loves you and cares for you, and you can call it what you will. It's the same thing. And your first intention should be to awaken to the truth that you are connected to this divine spirit. And this spirit loves you and cares for you and accepts you just the way you are. You do not have to be perfect. This is not about perfect. It's about the connection. So the first thing I would say is to realize that you're connected and that you are worthy. And
one thing I want to point out is that you use the word intention quite a few times, and I think that that's an important aspect of this as well, is setting the intention for what you're doing, but also to connect to the highest source of spirit that is possible. And I think that that's an important part of before beginning. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I also think that when you set your intentions, set it to be the highest and include somehow in the wording of your intention that it be the highest and best for you as you are. I may have an intention to be a ballerina, but I don't have the physical capabilities of being a ballerina. And so I could intend all day long to be a ballerina, and maybe I would achieve some sort of success with it. But if I had intended that my God-given gifts find their way to be expressed in the world to the highest of my abilities, you see the difference in the intention. I'm not limiting that intention.
Yes, and leaving the how up to God. I like that as well. One thing I also want to mention is that if anybody out there is going to try automatic writing, that you never do it under the influence of alcohol or drugs, because I think that opens you up. I think it's hard to maintain that clear intention of connecting to the highest source of spirit, and I think that just it is not good to enter into this kind of place from any chemically altered state.
I agree with that 100%. I have actually even turned down a glass of wine at this point in my life. I'm alcohol free. It doesn't have the right vibration for me. And so I just, my body doesn't like it. So I just prefer not to do it. And as you start with the automatic writing or any other kind of artistic expression where you feel like spirit is speaking to you in this form, you will find that as your vibration gets higher, you do not want to associate yourself through food or drink or anything with vibration, or maybe television, whatever, with vibrations that are lower. It'll be like sticking your foot in a very muddy puddle. It just doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's like we talked about earlier, how you shift, your vibration shifts, and you make that adjustment, and then you start to notice when things are much lower vibration than where you are at. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, is there before you start doing automatic writing, do you take some time and do some conscious breathing or grounding before you begin?
I actually do. I usually do it in what I have claimed as an office space. I got married 5 years ago to my childhood sweetheart, and I have turned a bedroom into an office space. It's my little environment right here. And it's not a big space, but I've had a window put in, and I'm perfectly content. But I will bring flowers in. I will make sure the energy of the room has been taken care of, whether that means sage or whether it means a spray or just bringing in right now. I knew we had this radio thing, a show, and I had flowers right here on the desk. The pink roses keep me grounded right now, and so that's what I'm doing. But I've got some salt lamps. I will make sure the energy is good. I am extremely affected by electromagnetic frequencies, and actually when I get chaotic, strange things happen to computers, and I have to watch that and make sure I am very grounded. So I will take care of those things first, and I never, ever open up without a prayer of protection, that this be for my highest good, that it come in a way that I can understand it, that it be holy and this type thing, and that I surrender to it and help me out. And I ask that my angels and guides come in to assist where they can.
Yes, and I do that too. One of the things I say is that I receive this message with clarity, honesty, and integrity, and always in my highest good, in the highest good of humanity.
I like that.
So it's as you find your own kind of way of doing it, you'll find your own wording and ritual. But, as we talked about, just the grounding, the creating a sacred space around you, conscious breathing, using protection, and making sure that you're not engaging in this from a chemically altered state, which is really important. But is there any other tip or tool that you would like to leave my listeners with today?
Yeah, sometimes it will not come the way you think it's going to come. Sometimes you will be all set to do automatic writing, and it just does not seem to come that way. But then later that night, you may have a dream that is the exact answer of what you need. So don't feel like you have failed if it doesn't come the way you expect it to come. That's why I say you leave the how-to to God. Because sometimes we have our intentions, but if we qualify them with ironclad expectations as to form and ability and I need 3 paragraphs. All right, let's go. Well, God may have 3 profound sentences, or 3 pages, So I guess the bottom line would be make sure you get out of your own way. Mm-hmm.
And that's going back to that idea of having, the willingness and being able to surrender. And I love the imagery that you gave of a mother holding her baby, and that it's not about, giving up or something like you waving the white flag, but really just about letting in and letting go. And so I really enjoy that. So we have just a couple of minutes left. I want to give you the opportunity to share where people can learn a little bit more about you and also find your book.
I have a website. It's paddyfievet.com, PADDYFIEVET.com. It may be down this week, but don't give up. Check back. I am revamping the website to have a lot more blogs, and I do a lot of writing on my website now, having some more writing put on it. And the book, Making of a Mystic, Writing as a Form of Spiritual Emergence, is available at Amazon. And it's also, you can also order it at small metaphysical bookstores or small bookstores.
And you also have another book called When Life Cried Out, One Woman's Spiritual Quest to Be Fully Alive. Were you a writer before this all happened?
No.
Huh.
No, I was not. I was not a writer before this happened. But I had an intuitive hit that I needed to start writing down my story. And I started When Life Cried Out, A Woman's Spiritual Quest to Be Fully Alive. And it is about my spiritual quest. And anybody that is interested in intuition and how God can speak to you through events in your life, or Spirit can speak to you through events in your life and take you far beyond what you ever thought you were capable of doing, then you will enjoy the stories in When Life Cried Out. I went to the pyramids. I went to the Temple of Nile. I had a huge experience in Malta with feminine rage to the point that it paralyzed me. And there's lots of experiences in there. I went to Auschwitz, and that's really quite an experience in that book. So it's an interesting book. It's not for the weak at heart or those that don't believe in intuition either, I may say. They cannot relate to it. But if you really have had a modicum of tiny experience with intuition in your life, then The Making of a Mystic, Right as a Form of Spiritual Emergence, and When Life Cried Out, I think you'll find them interesting. And they're both available at the same place, at Amazon or small bookstores.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. We had a bit of a rough start, but I think it was a fantastic conversation. So I want to thank you for that. Coming up next, we have OMTimes Music. You can get a hold of me during the week at angela@hestiahealth.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Entanglement Radio and Hestia Health. Next week, we have Kimberly Truitt, and I will be back live on April 8th with Reverend Dr. Karen Tate talking about sacred feminine liberation theology. You can hear me every Wednesday at noon right here on IOM FM. This is Angela Levesque sending you love and light. I'll be back live in just a couple of weeks.
Connecting